Most people have heard this before. Invest a small amount every month, let the compounding do the heavy work, and you'll retire a millionaire. The math checks out. So here's the uncomfortable question. If it's so simple, why do so many people reach their 50s or 60s with little or no savings at all? It's not laziness, and it's not ignorance. There's something else going on, something the simple formula doesn't account for. And once you see it, your paradigms will change. You've probably heard this one before. Put around $200 from every paycheck into an index fund. Do it for 40 years. Don't touch it. Retire with $1 million. That's the whole thing, start to finish. And here's what's strange. It's true. If you invest $213 a month at 25, earning somewhere around the market long-term average return, you'll really will land near $1 million at 65. We're talking $98 per bi-weekly paycheck. It's barely a tank of gas and a few dinners out. So why doesn't everyone do it? Not rhetorically. Actually, why? The information is free. It's everywhere. It doesn't require a financial advisor or a spreadsheet or any particular discipline beyond setting up a recurring transfer. You could do it in about 4 minutes right now and then genuinely forget about it for the next 40 years. And yet, about a third of Americans between 45 and 60 have no retirement account. Not a small one, not one they forgot about. Nothing. Half of the working population inside the last 20 years of their careers, starting from zero. I've turned that number over in my head a lot. Either the advice is way too simple to be believed, or it's harder to follow than it looks. I personally have landed firmly on the second one. And I think the way personal finance gets talked about, breezy, optimistic, here's the simple math, lives out most of what actually happens to people between 25 and 65. Let's go back to being 22. You just got your first real job after college. If you have gone to college, it probably means you borrowed money to do it. The average borrower graduates carrying around $30,000 in student debt, and a lot of the people carry twice that or sometimes triple. So exactly when the compounding clock is supposed to start ticking, you're not even starting from zero. You're starting from negative $30, $40, $50, $100,000. Your salary, if things went really well, is somewhere in the low to mid 50s before taxes. After rent, groceries, transportation, and the minimum loan payment, you're keeping your head up just above the water. There is no slack. There is no obvious place where $213 a month fits without something else getting squeezed out. This is the very first place the simple advice breaks down in. It assumes a clean starting line, and most people don't get one. They get a hole, and the first several years of their adult working life go toward climbing out of the hole, not building anything significant. But let's stay optimistic and say you managed it through. By 28 or 29, you've cleared the loans, gotten a raise or two, and opened a brokerage account. You have set up your automatic transfers, and you feel good about it. Then the second thing happens. You realize slowly and then all at once that nobody actually taught you how money works. I don't mean this as a criticism, it's more an observation. Most of us didn't grow up in a house where compound interest came up over dinner conversation, where someone explained what a debt-to-income ratio actually signals and why the order in which you invest matters as much as the amount. That kind of financial fluency tends to get passed down in families that already have money, and everyone else figures it out kind of later as they go along, through reading or mistakes or both. By the time it finally clicks, you're usually in your late 20s or early 30s. And that timing matters way more than most people realize. The first decade of a 40-year compounding run is disproportionately powerful. The money you put in at 25 does way more work than money that you put in at 35, even if the 35-year-old deposits more of it. Missing those early years isn't fatal, but it is a real, tangible cost, and it's a cost you pay for not knowing something nobody bothered to teach you in the first place. I used to think that this was easily solvable with better personal finance content. Read the right books early enough and problem sorted. But the more I sat with it, the more I noticed the structure underneath. Financial literacy isn't taught in most schools. Money is still taboo to discuss openly. And the people who already understand it tend to learn it alongside the actual inherited wealth. It's not random who figures this out early. But anyway, let's say you're the exception. You learned early, you started early, you're ahead of the schedule. You're 30, invested, doing the thing, and then life hands you a mortgage. Buying a house is the exact moment this plan gets very interesting. Around the same time, for a lot of people, come a partner, kids, and a full domestic setup arriving in a cluster inside a 2, 3, or 4 year window. And very quickly you discover that children cost money in ways that don't show up in any single line item. The daycare in most mid-sized American cities runs between $1,500 and $2,500 a month per child. That's not a tiny thing to absorb. Add summer programs, after school activities, shoes kids outgrow in a season, a pediatric urgent care visit that turned out to be out of network. None of it is extravagant, it's just the new baseline. And the house has its own schedule. The dishwasher goes in year 2, the water heater in year 4. And at some point in the next decade, you'll have a conversation about the roof that involves a number you weren't quite ready to hear. And somewhere in there, you'll need a new car and find out that the prices went up 40% from the last time you bought one. You'll wonder briefly if you've missed something huge. You didn't. It just happened while you were too busy with other things. None of this is living lavishly. It's ordinary adult life, and it costs real money. Money that was, in theory, supposed to be compounding quietly in the background. The 100 a month version of this story treats this part of life like it barely exists. The real version has 15 simultaneous expenses, some predictable, most arriving sideways, spread across 20 years you were supposed to be consistently saving through. Here's the part that's hardest to talk about. Sometimes things break badly. A layoff, a medical bill that lands at $10,000 after insurance for something that wasn't optional, a house repair that turns out to be 3 house repairs back to back. These aren't exotic misfortunes. They're ordinary ones, and they happen on no particular schedule. About half of the American adults can't cover a $500 emergency without putting it on a credit card. $500, which means any unplanned expense at all becomes immediate debt. And credit card debt at 22% interest compounds in exactly the wrong direction. You don't build anything, you're falling backwards. I have heard the responses to this. Just have an emergency fund. Just pay the card off monthly. Just don't spend what you don't have. And yes, obviously. But that advice only works if there's something left over after the fixed costs. And for a lot of households, there just isn't. Telling someone who is already at their limit to just save more doesn't land as advice. It lands as noise. So here's what the picture actually looks like when you add it all up. The formula works. The math is real. But it was drawn up without the student loans, without the decade of repayment, without the kids and the cars and the dishwasher and the layoff. It also didn't account for inflation, which at 3% annual compounding will cut you $1 million roughly in half by the time you go to spend it. You're not actually saving toward $1 million. You're saving toward the equivalent of about half that in today's money. Worth doing, clearly. But to actually get there in real purchasing power, you have to sustain the effort across 4 decades of life that will reliably be messy. And while you're doing that, you also need to be building an emergency fund, saving for the roof, setting aside money for the next car, maybe contributing to your kid's college fund. The real savings target, once you account for all of it, isn't anywhere near $100 per paycheck. It's a lot closer to $800 or $1,000 a month, depending on your specific situation. For a household earning the median income somewhere in the $70,000 to $80,000 range before taxes, that is a serious ask. It's not impossible. Some people do it, but it is a serious ask. That's the version of the story that doesn't get told. The one where it's not one goal, it's six, running in parallel indefinitely through everything life is going to throw at you. None of this means it can't be done. The people who go to retirement with actual stability, who maybe even have enough left over to help a kid with a down payment on a house, or set something aside for the grandchildren, they didn't do anything dramatically different from everybody else. They are not financial wizards. They didn't necessarily time the market or find some overlooked hidden strategy. What they did was actually much smaller, simpler, and a lot harder than that. They kept going. They understood that the plan works inside a life and that the life is going to push back, and they built enough buffers and margin that the pushback didn't completely derail them. They kept the retirement contributions running through the tight months. They kept the cash set aside for the roof that's coming in 5 years or 10, so they didn't have to finance it at 12 or 17%. They allowed the accumulated savings to stay saved, even when the number got large enough to feel like permission to spend more and reward yourself. Here's the image that I keep coming back to. If you put $10,000 into an investment account the very first day a grandchild is born, if you never touch it, by the time that child is 30, it's around 150. One simple decision and 30 years of time doing its work. And that child now starts adulthood with a foundation instead of in a hole. Of course, that's not a dynasty. It's not a legacy in any significant sense. It's just someone getting a slightly better starting line than you had. And that might be the simplest version of what this whole thing is actually for. Not wealth as an endpoint, not the $1,000,000 number, but the slow and steady accumulation of options over a very long time so that you and maybe the people after you care about have a little more room to move. The 100 a month is real. It's just not the full story. The full story is 40 years of ordinary life and the choice made over and over again and again to keep saving through it. Thank you.